Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Vacation Rental Blueprint, the podcast for short term rental owners looking to thrive in the ever changing vacation rental industry. I'm your host, as always, Tim, and I am joined by my amazing co host today and every episode, TC. TC, hello, how's it going?
Doing great. Great to be back. Another great topic for our listeners today.
This is one of those episodes, and I think we've kind of touched on this concept multiple times over the course of the last 15 plus episodes. But this idea of Airbnbust, there's kind of been continuous speculation and concern about the future of the short term rental industry coming out of the COVID pandemic, and then as we're seeing the housing market fluctuate and interest rates fluctuate and home prices and everything's kind of in flux as it usually is. That question continues to pop up. Is this a dying industry? Hotels are getting more aggressive. There's a lot of inventory out there. Are we facing a reckoning? Is this kind of catching up to an industry that maybe grew too fast? But today I think our focus and what we're going to try to do is just kind of have a conversation. A lot of our partner profiles, we spend a lot of time researching and being ready to dig into these specific topics. And this is no different other than, TC, and I think we're just going to have one of our sort of normal conversations. We're just, happening to record this for our listeners so they can understand our perspective and how we think about this very, I think, personal question that if someone hasn't had a booking for a period of time, they start to wonder, well, is it me or is it the industry? So really looking forward to this episode today, as you and I, as I always do, look forward to our conversations.
Yeah, I think it's a very timely conversation. You noted a number of variables that everybody who is an owner of a short-term rental business is facing today. You've got the economy, you've got what's going on with interest rates if you want to finance a home, you've got pricing, you've got the hotels, you've got all of these variables. But I think if you just break through all the clutter and answer the question, which is a short term rental business still a viable business? I think the answer is a resounding yes. And I think what we have to do is start kind of dissecting what's going on and why owners may be feeling some of these stresses and pressures. But it's not because, in my opinion, the industry is dying. I think it's changing. I think it's evolving. And I think what we have to do is help our listeners really think about that evolution and how we all have to adapt to it.
Yeah, and I think when we look at, just the current landscape of the short-term rental industry, I mean it obviously had a big boom, period there where, people were really seeing the opportunity and people were jumping in, and there were at some points really great interest rates. There was, the opportunity to get into these properties and there was demand. You can point to COVID and some of the challenges with some of our key competitors in the hotel space, just in terms of operating their business, a bit of a slowdown, and there was a great maybe a feeling of relief to be able to go into an Airbnb, still be able to travel, get some sense of normalcy in your life during that period, and be able to jump into a short term rental and have the space that you chose and that you wanted to have that separation while still kind of bringing people in your family together. So, as we came out of that, I think we've started to see there's a lot of players in the Airbnb space. There's a lot of individuals that have invested over the last 3 years in their property. And then as competition kind of returned to normal, I don't necessarily think the competition from the hotels is, anything other than those in that industry returning to their normal as they've sort of just normalized their operations. But it's really that perspective right now, and maybe this is just me jumping to my opinion on the matter, but I really think it's those individuals that kind of jumped into this adventure of short-term rentals and weren't really prepared. We talk a lot about preparing and building business plans and having a strategy and executing your plan. That's really at the core of what we do in business every single day. But I think where it's really catching up to us are in the ways that some of those ill-prepared short-term rental owners are now feeling the sting of it. Maybe they didn't, jump into their design with 2 feet like they should have, as we talked about with Tammy, and her company when we did our design episode. And, maybe they, didn't invest in the right cleaning company. Maybe their property took a bit of a beating. Maybe they haven't maintained the preventative maintenance. I think, the current landscape of short-term rentals, TC, I think is a split, and I don't know what that percent is, but it's really a split of individuals who know what they're doing and individuals who are trying to, for the lack of a better term, jump off the cliff and build the plane on their way down, right? Trying to figure out what they're doing now that it's starting to get tough.
Yeah, and I think we want to help all people, everyone that's an owner today. I think regardless of how you got here, we want to offer you some guidance. We're incorporating that guidance ourselves, but hindsight being 2020, it's not difficult to realize how we got here today. I mean, if you think about it, before COVID, the short-term rental industry was emerging. It had a lot of hype behind it and there was a lot of interest in the consumer's mindset. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, the hotel shuttered. So an individual that wanted to travel, the only alternative really was, an Airbnb, a Verbo, a short-term rental that they could access. It was the only one that was providing you access to space. And because of that, there was huge demand, and because of that demand, owners were able to increase their nightly rates and they were printing money. It was easy money back then. And I think today, all we're seeing is it's no longer easy money. It's something we've got to work for. It's something where you've got to really understand not only how we got here, but more importantly, what's the path forward. But it's not hard to understand why we're here. But now, for our listeners, what I think we want to do is we're here. Let's help all of us create a path forward to get back to a very lucrative business model that doesn't just, rely on easy money. This is no longer the easy money environment.
I think back to a lot of my buddies during the pandemic where, they went from essentially overnight working from an office to working from home and having a lot of flexibility to go travel, and so they packed up their families, they jumped in their SUVs or jumped on a nearly empty plane and found an Airbnb and were able to work from essentially wherever. And that return to a semblance of a previous normal, sort of a hybrid new normal, is kind of limited that flexibility for the traveler to just on a whim jump out. They're kind of back to, okay, we got to return to the office. I get X amount of vacation time to go do that, and I need to be a little more strategic with planning that. And I think that again goes back to, as short-term rental owners, we have to acknowledge that, we have to be aware of that, and we have to understand that it's our responsibility to be an appealing, uh, offer an appealing product for when those individuals do decide and choose to go travel again. That there's plenty of opportunity out there, there's plenty of inventory out there, but again, that just goes back to why as owners we have to really be mindful of the business we're operating, from the perspective of, yes, cash on cash returns, building out your pro forma, but then also, making sure you're providing and creating a wonderful guest experience for everyone that does come in, because maybe there's more inventory when they jump on an Airbnb or a Verbo to look at now when they're searching for properties. Maybe they had a great experience at your property and maybe there's more availability of inventory now. So you really need to strike at the heartstrings of their experience and be able to leave them something memorable so they keep coming back. Because I do think that return guests are so powerful as long as you keep that conversation passively going with them post their stay.
Well, I think that's right. And you bring up a great point. Individuals are no longer quite as free to travel. It's got to be more planned, it's got to be more thoughtful. And when it was such a boom, there were so many individuals that bought short term rentals that it really is now a supply and demand equation. The supply became so incredibly high, and the demand was also high. But all of a sudden, hotels started reopening, a lot more alternatives, even more demand. Oh, I'm sorry, even more supply. And yet the demand started to wane because, the traveler wasn't as free to travel as they used to be. So we have a supply and demand dilemma to work through, but it's not just supply and demand. When it was easy money, I think some of us owners got a bit lazy. We saw it as easy money. We didn't double down on our hospitality. We didn't double down on our cleanliness standards. We didn't do a lot of things that you have to do in the hospitality industry. And now it's kind of biting us in the ass. Now we have to deal with that reputation that was built up during this time that it was easy money. And to some degree, maybe we were taking advantage of the guest. And now we have to plant ourselves firmly in that competitive environment where the supply is very, very high and the demand is lower. So I think the question becomes, okay, well, that's the condition. How do we solve for it?
You mentioned easy money a couple times, just so everyone listening here understands. I think when we say easy money, when we're looking at a short-term rental, we're looking at a second home type situation. So, even in the periods of what, 2.5 to 3.25% interest rates on primary, for a second home, I think, and TC, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was closer to 3.5 to 5% interest for that second home.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
so when you think about what interest rates are now for a primary, goodness gracious, I can't imagine because I haven't, and I say I can't imagine because I haven't in the last, I would say 6 months, put together a pro forma on a new property that I was looking to acquire, basically because I think I know how it shakes out when you factor in a 8 to 10% interest rate on a second home on a vacation rental right now. So I think the conversation we're having is if you currently are operating an STR, a short-term rental, and asking yourself, "Oh shit, am I riding a wave in a dying industry?" The answer is no. If we're asking ourselves, "Is now the right time to get into STR?" That's a different story for each individual because it factors into how much money do you have to put down. What is the interest rate at any given period? As we are talking to you today, interest rates are moving in the wrong direction as they have been for the last few months. But hopefully, if you've been following us and listening to our content, you understand that we can't give you a firm yes or no is now the time to get into STR. And that can be a different episode that we can dive into a little more. But essentially, I think we've given you the tools up to this point to be able to make that assessment yourself. When you factor in purchase price plus these interest rates, you get an understanding of what your occupancy needs to be, what your nightly rate needs to be, and what you need to carry in terms of top line revenue to be able to flow through any sort of, cash on cash return that is, interesting to you in this given market. So today, I think, it's more of, okay, you're operating a short term rental and maybe you got in at a great entry point. You got in at a great interest rate. You got in when prices, yeah, they were ticking up, but they weren't at their peak. You're looking at, you're looking at a nice mortgage and a very realistic occupancy need in order to hit a break even. But if you have all of that and you still have no bookings, you're still losing. And that's really where, being able to jump into assessing your performance, assessing your guest experience, their expectations of you, and then how your competition, and if that's hotels, if that's Airbnbs and Verbos, if that's neighboring communities that have a high concentration of short-term rentals, I really think that we need to talk a lot about assessing kind of the current state of your competition right now and using that to really level set your expectations and how you're going to push your business forward. Because it's not, is STR dying? It's, we really hope that you've kind of followed along on our path and followed along in what we've been sharing and been able to implement some of these strategies so that you're not in this position where people hate when I say it, but it's the death spiral of a business, right? And this isn't just an STR term. This is a business concept of you start to make decisions to play defense in your business, and that defense actually exacerbates the struggles in your business. So you start to get in this almost out of control spiral down to the bottom being, essentially business failure. That's a dangerous game to play, and it's, one that oftentimes people don't even realize they're doing it, right? They're just trying to do what they think is right for their business, and ultimately it's defensive maneuvers. And I think of like the example, I was talking to someone recently about, of, they decided to shop their cleaning company, TC, and you know that game and how damaging that can be to your business, because they're like, well, I think I can shave off $20 on my cleaning company if I go with a different cleaning company. I think that'll help me, and that's kind of what I'm doing. And I think that's just one of the many breadcrumbs toward a death spiral that I really try to guide people away from those decisions. But it's one that naturally you kind of go to, right?
It is, and I think if we go back to the original question, is the short-term rental industry dying? I think it's the wrong question. I think the question really is, given market conditions today, how do I become more successful with my short-term rental business? That's the framing. That's how we have to frame this conversation is, no, it's not dying. Think about it. As a short-term rental business owner, think about the advantages that you bring to a potential guest with your home. Think about a family of six, a mom and dad and four kids, and they're traveling to Disney World. They need multiple hotel rooms, most likely, or they're going to pay incredible amounts of money for a suite. So, what do you have to offer as a short term rental owner? You've got this wonderful home with an area to gather for the family, individual bedrooms. You are head and shoulders have a better offering than a hotel room. But what does a hotel have? Well, a hotel has daily service now. They're back to doing daily room service as far as cleaning and bringing fresh towels and so forth. Okay, that's an advantage on their end. And they have someone immediately on site to respond to issues when issues arise. Okay, that's a check on their box, but we can solve for that. So this is again, it's a competitive marketplace. What we have to do is encourage all of our owners, our listeners, to think about this. What are your advantages? What's the advantages of the competition? And then how do you take that information and adapt, modify, adjust your business model to leapfrog the competition? And I really do believe there's ways to do it, Tim.
Yeah, I mean the cleaning, and shout out to CleaningBnB. Just a great example of a cleaning company doing things the right way, to high standards, consistent execution, and full accountability. But the cleaning example is a great example of, you've got one room, right? You're paying for one single room, and that cleaner, that housekeeper, who is a rock star, they clean the same room every day, and it's one room, and yeah, you trashed it or the kids trashed it, but they have one room to clean, like 400 square feet. It's not big. And then you compare that to some of these short-term rentals out there in the vacation destinations that have high bedroom counts, and it's the amount of work it goes into cleaning these properties really requires a skill set that is sort of like housekeeper plus plus. And just again, going back to why you can't skimp. I mean, we did a whole episode on why you should not price shop for the lowest price. I got an email the other day, and it was like, "We'll clean your 10 bedroom for $125." And I think I think you and I like shot it back and forth to each other, because it was, it's almost insane to think someone accepted that offer. Like, someone's like, yes, I can save $300 or $250 on my cleaning. This is how I'm going to win my customers over. And it's like, okay, well, obviously they weren't listening to the vacation rental blueprint, because goodness gracious, that is a recipe for disaster. But it really does, in all service and hospitality, like lodgings and restaurants, I mean, it really does all start with cleanliness and safety. And if you're not doing that first and foremost, you really can't be questioning is this a dying industry, right? I mean, that, to your point, it's the wrong question. It's what are you doing in your business to maximize your results and drive your revenue? And then, it's really doesn't matter what the rest of the industry is doing because you're doing the right things by your business and you're running a great business. And I think that's really what it boils down to.
I think that's exactly right. And if we just want to start detailing out some of the things that we can do to adapt to this ever changing environment, you touched on a few of them. One, you got to make sure that the house is incredibly clean when that guest checks in. Again, if you do the compare and contrast in this competitive marketplace, hotels are going to be, they're going to give you great confidence that when you check in, it's going to be clean. And if it's not, they're going to respond to it quickly. So, as a short term rental owner, we've got to make sure we over index our emphasis on making sure the house is incredibly clean. Safety standards have been inspected and verified. We have to think about the communication that we have with the guest, both pre, during, and post checkout. What is that level of communication and hospitality that we bring to this? And then I think we have to rethink in some cases our checkout time and our check in time. Tim, you said it, in a hotel, you have to check out by 11 and you can't check in until 4, and they're cleaning 250 square feet. So I think we've got to rethink how we clean, when we clean, the amount of time we dedicate to the cleaning. Maybe back to backs is not a great idea, just throwing that out there. We may have to rethink this idea of somebody checking out at 11 o'clock and then trying to get the house clean by 4 when it's a large home. Not very doable. So, do we need to rethink that? And then, Tim, we've talked about this a bit, but when you check into that hotel, they don't give you your check in or your reservation and say, okay, check the box if you want us to provide heat for the pool outside. Check the box if you want us to include air conditioning for your stay. Check the box if, and on and on. So I think we've got to rethink this nickel and diming that maybe we did back when there wasn't any competition. And then the last thing I would throw out there, and I'm thinking about this a lot, we stopped charging the guest for pool heat and we stopped charging the guest for premium channels. We included that. I am now thinking about not charging the guest extra for cleaning, but instead incorporating that into my nightly rate because it's the one big difference with hotels. When you book a reservation in a hotel, you don't get your nightly rate and then a summary for cleaning. It's all incorporated in. I do think that when the guest is doing that compare and contrast, hotel room versus a short term rental home, and they see that big lump sum cleaning number, I think we've got to think about that. I'm not recommending we change it today, but I think we've got to be thinking about things like that, how we can adapt as this environment changes.
Let's not forget, and it's easy to forget, pre 2019, pre 2020, Airbnb was still growing, vacation rental, short-term rentals were still growing at a rapid pace, but it was a little more of a community. I almost felt like I felt like it was, you were renting. I remember, you and I were actually traveling around the country running Spartan races. Shout out to Spartan races because some of my greatest memories are almost dying on the side of a mountain with you due to hypothermia. We actually did a circuit. Like we traveled the country and ran 1 to 2 races every month. And Airbnb got a lot of our money because we were just staying exclusively at Airbnbs. And I remember I was in an Arizona race. I think you were on the other side of the country doing something and not able to meet me for the race. So my wife and I and the kiddos jumped in the car and we drove from Colorado at that point down to Arizona, and we stayed at an Airbnb in New Mexico. And then we, slept really quickly. Got about 4 hours of sleep, jumped back in the car, hit Arizona, and it was this nicest family. We stayed at their Airbnb. It was actually like an RV garage. And part of it, they had kind of built a little Airbnb within the RV garage, and it was a separate unit. Like you felt you were just in a normal townhome, for lack of a better comparison. But the owners got home. Like we were in on a Friday, so the owners got home from work. I think one of them was a school teacher. They got home and they were just in the backyard with their dog, and we went out and talked to them for a couple hours. Our dog embarrassingly jumped in their pool, and we nervously laughed. I think they got a kick out of how poorly trained our dog was, but it was more of a community that I think, and maybe this is a larger societal commentary on, the pandemic did a good job of isolating us and getting us comfortable not being in that type of community. But I just think to Airbnb, where it was, I mean, you stayed at a property and you stripped the sheets and you kind of helped clean up. It was different from a hotel because you kind of respected that it was someone's space. And then at some point from whenever that date was to today, it really kind of, I think, got a lot closer to comparison to a hotel. I hear it a lot more, specifically, well, I don't pay a cleaning fee at a hotel. Why do I have to pay it here? I don't have to do that at a hotel. Why do I have to do it here? What do you mean? I called the owner in the middle of the night and told them I needed more towels, and they said no. I can't believe they did that. And it's, there's really been a blurring of the line, I think, in terms of the comparison between your hotel stay and an Airbnb stay, because they used to be very different experiences, and I still think today they are. I think you have a lot less patience from guests, and I think that might have been, at the crux of what started this Airbnbust was, the more you started to compare it to hotels, the more you realized it was just a different experience. And I personally, having traveled around the country for jobs and spent way too many nights in hotels, I would give anything to a company that would allow me to expense an Airbnb versus a hotel. How great would that be? It doesn't happen, but maybe it does now, but it didn't for me back then. But I do think that, there are definitely different experiences, but there are things that you can, for lack of a better term, steal from a hotel. And maybe that is the cleaning fee. Maybe that is, something along those lines where an Airbnb, I think they addressed it in their 2023 summer release, not as part of the release, but that they were actively working on ways to control the cleaning fees. I do. I just, and I know I'm waxing poetic here about my experiences in Airbnbs, but they really have always been pretty darn good experiences. But I don't think I've ever compared them to a hotel. And maybe that's some of the challenge right now is we as short-term rental owners, we need to acknowledge that more of our guests are comparing us to a hotel. And to your point, TC, we gotta take some of the things that work in a hotel and see how we can, build a similar type of amenity. Maybe not amenity, because that gets us in trouble, but provide certain things inclusive of price, not separate from nightly rate.
I think that, again, my opinion for whatever it's worth, but I think we allowed those comparisons to happen when we took our eye off the ball on some of those fundamentals that are really important to guests, like cleanliness. And Tim, you've read all of the blogs, all of the whatever, where guests just rant about, I got my checkout cleaning list of all the things I had to do before I could check out. It was 2 pages long. Well, think about that. Think about if you checked into a hotel and the night before you were checking out, you got an email that said, "Okay, before you leave, make sure you take your sheets and your towels down to the first floor. There's a laundromat. You got to clean." I mean, that's ridiculous. And yet, as short-term rental owners, we got away with it because when I say easy money, what I say, we could almost get away with asking the guest to do things we shouldn't be asking, and we were asking rates because there was no other option. We got to wake up. There are options today. It's a very competitive environment, and we've got to really think hard about those ever changing environments and how we adapt. And I think it's at that time where we've got to adapt and think differently about, we have advantages that a hotel doesn't have. Let's capitalize on those advantages, but also let's make sure that we are 100% on those fundamentals that are critical, whether it's a short term rental or a hotel. Let's not put the guest in a position of being able to make those comparisons. So I've got to look inward. I blame myself. I think we as owners have to blame ourselves for part of where we are today, but we can also take accountability and responsibility for a path forward.
And it's an interesting question for listeners out there who are operating short-term rentals is, when was the last time you assessed your cleaning fee? When was the last time you assessed the checkout instructions for your guests? I mean, we just did an episode on the rental agreement at the end of season 1. Have you updated your rental agreement? How many items in those communication templates are you just rolling with and haven't really assessed to say, in this business environment, what adjustments do I need to make? To your point, a year ago, what worked 18 months ago, 24 months ago, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work regardless of when and where the industry is. So, I think going into your templates, going into your communication tools, and doing an honest assessment, really analyzing for today what makes sense. If you've got a condo at 109 a night, but you charge $125 cleaning fee because you've always been able to get away with it, and you also had the guest strip the sheets and do the dishes and mop the floor, that's an extreme example, but I think it's definitely what I've seen, and not years ago. It's an example I've seen recently by someone who was, just reaching out to me going, well, I'm thinking about getting into the STR space, and here's what, the others in my area are doing. Can I do that? Why, if everyone else is doing it, why can't I do it? And my feedback was just what we said was, you need to really assess what your goals are in your business, and you need to assess what makes sense right now. Cause I guarantee that individual going 109 a night with $125 cleaning fee and full directions for the guest to clean the house. That's the holdover policy from when they could, literally do whatever they wanted because it was so challenging to find a place to stay.
Yeah, one of the things that we're going to try, we've talked about this a lot, but we are going to eliminate the cleaning fee. That's coming here very, very shortly. So we're going to take away the cleaning fee. We're going to stop doing back to backs because I believe we need to give ourselves plenty of time to ensure not only safety, but cleanliness. So if they check out on a Friday at 4, the next check in will be on Saturday. So we're not going to do back to backs, and we're not going to do a cleaning fee, and we're going to revise our ask of the guest upon checkout. I mean, think about it. If you are finishing your vacation, you're kind of bummed anyway. Your stay has come to an end. You've had a great time. You really don't want to go home. You want to be able to continue that feeling of the great time you've been having. And then you're faced with this horrific cleaning list. So we're going to simply say, you know what, if you would do us a favor and make sure you put all of the towels in a bathroom and just empty all the food out, that'd be helpful to us. And leave it at that. The cleaning team, they're paid a good fee. Cleaning B&B does a great job, and they're going to do their job and get the house ready for the next guest. So again, I'm not saying this is the answer. I'm saying that as the industry changes, we have to find the adaptations that work and once again return us to a place of being not only competitive, but where our competitive advantage can shine.
And that, I mean, that life cycle of a guest stay, having that cognizance to be able to say, just what you said, the emotional kind of drain when a vacation is over, especially a vacation with young kids and everyone is tired. And it's your last day. Many people aren't, driving across the street to get home. They're making either long car rides or jumping in an airplane. It's sort of a depressing, little bit of a depressing time for families because, the reality of, returning home starts to set in and the vacation's over. As owners, we want to maintain the positivity because we want to follow up with them to book a future visit. We want to follow up with them and see if they haven't, make sure they had a wonderful time, but then make sure that they are really being your advocate to their friends and family to tell them about the experience they had at your property. I mean, the number of return guests that we've had, and then those individuals who have had great stays and then tell their friends, and then their friends book with us. We can do a whole episode on direct booking, and yeah, that's fine, but really, if you're trying to excite word of mouth, it's that type of strategy, TC, that you just talked about, where it was taking into account the emotional piece of it and making checkout as easy as possible, and as streamlined as possible so people can get out the door. I really do think that pays off in the form of higher likelihood to return and higher likelihood to tell a friend about their experience at your property.
I think that's right, and we've talked about this on a prior podcast. You've got this bookend effect that the guest goes through. Traveling to get there, it's never easy. I think travel is harder now than it has been in a long time. I mean, travel is never easy, and guests go through a lot to pack up the family and to travel to where they're going. That's the front end, that front end of the bookend. So when they check into your short term rental, that's the first opportunity they have to decompress and to enter vacation mode. And if the house isn't clean, man, all we have done is we have taken that front end of the bookend stress and expanded it into their stay. Bad on us. And then on the back end, they've had a great time during their vacation. They've got to go home. The last thing you want to do is frustrate them with the other side of the bookend with a big cleaning list. So I'm on a rant now. I feel like we should bring this to a recap, but man, this has got me all ranted up.
I did have one question when we were talking. We're sort of in real time ideation on cleaning fees, and we'll keep talking about where those cleaning fees go, or if they're completely eliminated. I've heard another perspective too, where it's like, I'm going to eliminate the cleaning fee line item that is often on these OTAs. I'm gonna zero that out, but I'm going to do a better job of communicating and almost line iteming my nightly rate so guests can understand, that maybe there is a cleaning fee associated with the nightly rate, but it's essentially close to zero. But I've heard a couple people talking about that, of like, well, I'm going to not highlight the cleaning fee, but I'm going to make sure they know that that nightly rate includes the cleaning and includes everything that's included, so that they know it's there, but it's all baked into one price. Because I do think people like that one price. They don't want to be caught off guard. They don't like the surcharges. They don't like the extra charges. If you give them one price, they're going to respect that. Curious of your thoughts on that, like in terms of, do you just give them one nightly rate price and not give them the transparency and general breakdown of where that comes from and where that goes to, or do you like the idea of giving them a little peek inside to understand the rate and what we're doing on our end to try to keep that total price one price?
Yeah, I really like the transparency, and I think our guests deserve that. I think where they get frustrated is when they see a nightly rate advertised and then they get to the checkout and they see all these big additions of cleaning fee and so forth. So I really do like this idea of detailing out what they're getting for that nightly rate. In some cases, you're getting the amenities of the resort. Add that in there. I mean, it's included. You're getting the amenities of the pool heat. You're getting premium channels, and you're getting, a great cleaning so that when you check out and the next guest check, you all those things detailed out to not rationalize, but to explain with good transparency the nightly rate. I think that's just smart. And then when the guest gets to the checkout, they won't see that big addition that frustrates the heck out of them.
And that's playing offense against a hotel, because that's what many hotels are notorious for. I'm going to advertise $199 a night rate, but then when you check out at the end of your stay, here's your resort fee, here's this fee. Oh, you parked a car, here's another fee. That's a big stress point for people I know who are still staying in hotels. So, you have an opportunity here to, build credibility, build trust with your guests, but then also directly compete against larger hotels who are still putting those hidden fees all over that final bill that hits. I think we're at recap time. Another great episode.
This is a tough one to recap because I went on a rant and I forgot to make great notes, but I'll give it a shot anyway. Let's start with saying that, we introduced the question that we're now going to propose is the wrong question. The question isn't, is the industry dying? The question is, what can we do to thrive in this ever changing environment? Number two is we know that we're in the midst of a lot of different issues facing the industry, interest rates, economy, etc. But at the end of the day, I think what we really have is a supply and demand issue. So then the question becomes, how do you adapt to this new supply and demand issue and still thrive? I think we touched on a few things. One is really recognize the advantages that we bring guests looking for a place to stay. When we have a short term rental vacation home, there are so many advantages for the guest. Let's keep those top of mind. That's a huge asset that we have in those advantages. Secondly, let's be mindful of those fundamentals that we can't slip on. Things that the hotels do well with, the fundamentals such as cleaning, such as responding to issues when they arise, such as pre check in communication. Those are fundamentals. Let's not allow ourselves to be compared to hotels. Let's execute on those fundamentals. And then finally, how do we look at the other competitors in our space, like hotels, and how can we take things from their model and adapt them to ours? Such as, I love this idea of a transparent nightly rate without a lump sum cleaning fee lumped in there at the end. I love that idea. I think it's smart. And then let's be very thoughtful about making sure we have great cleanliness standards, great safety standards in our home, and we want to make sure that we don't ask the guest to ruin a great stay by this long laundry list of cleaning items when they're checking out. So, again, those are just adaptations that I think we can make and learn from our competitors in the space. And all that summarized, nice little bow on it, we can thrive in this changing environment as long as we really open our eyes and understand the competitive environment that we're in today and develop a roadmap forward to thrive.
Yep, and that's just it. Stay ahead of the curve. I mean, we're in the business of execution. We're in the business of service and hospitality. And when you do that, it's a competitive landscape. There's some great minds in this space that are always innovating and moving it forward. So, as short-term rental owners, stay ahead of the curve, be adaptable because that is so crucial. And as TC mentioned, don't let the speculation deter you. There's incredible opportunities in this industry, and those opportunities aren't slowing down. It only slows down if you start to let that speculation of an Airbnbust get to your head. So, as always, TC, thanks so much for the time. And if you enjoyed this episode, found it helpful, please, as always, my ask is share this with others that you know who are entering into this space or currently operating a short-term rental because we're here to help. That said, TC, great time, great conversation as always, and everyone out there. Until we talk again, thanks for everything. Happy hosting.